Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Anshul of Certify. Anshul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Well, to kick things off, I'd like to start with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
Yeah. Honestly, if anyone told me 4 or 5 years ago or when I was growing up that I would be recording this podcast, I would have probably laughed it off. I grew
Mm,
up in a very small town, absolutely in middle of nowhere in India. There were no English medium schools, so I went to a Hindi medium school until I was in 10th grade and basically learned English by watching Friends on loop. That's how
mm,
I really learned English. In
wow.
India, most of the people either do become a doctor or an engineer. I was not interested in studying for 10, 15 years and becoming a doctor.
Yeah.
So the other obvious career choice for me was just becoming an engineer.
Mm,
Luckily, I was able to get into a decent engineering school in India, and I was always more interested in business side of engineering than
mm,
that engineering.
yeah.
And during the 4 years I barely studied engineering, but in the final year I took up a project of basically electrifying my entire college through solar energy.
Mm, wow.
That led to my first venture. I started a venture right after I graduated. I built a light dependent resistor based solar street lighting solution, grew that business to decent scale, and one of the larger companies in that area came and acquired that business.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
starting out in solar panels, kind of diving into that. Incredible milestone by sounds like powering your own university, your own school. What did that team look like? I mean, kicking that off the ground and then eventually having another business get acquired. That's really impressive.
Yeah, it was the team was basically, it was a group of 4 students, and most were toppers in my class, so they were doing like the technical stuff, and I was
Mm,
creating a business case for the administration to really fund it.
mm,
The exact same technology that these toppers or like really the frontline students were preparing, I took that circuit and made that into a full-time business after I graduated.
mm,
And that was really the starting of it. It was not just like Certify, it was not thought out, oh, I want to build a business. It was just
yep.
like, I'm interested in this thing. I think I'm really passionate and obsessive about this thing. Let me see what the opportunity is here. And
Mm,
that's how it really started.
interesting. So after that business was acquired, I mean, right after graduation, what did you get into then? What were your interests right after that acquisition?
Yeah, that's such a great question. My parents, who did everything in their power to give me good education in the beginning, said, we didn't get the chance to go to the best universities, but we want to give you a chance, and they were pushing me to go to the United States.
Mm,
So I gave my GRE examination, TOEFL examinations. Again, like I was able to score decently well, and one thing led to another. I ended up being getting admitted to Brown University.
mm, wow.
That
I
was
mean,
my first interaction with United States,
y-
honestly.
yeah. I mean, what was that change like for you growing up in India, going to school in India for engineering, and then going to the U.S.? What was that like for you?
It was definitely, it was like night and day. I
Yeah.
think it's not as huge of a difference for people who grow up in metro cities in India, because westernization has started coming to those cities.
Mm,
For me, I'd went to Hindi medium schools. I was still like basically trying to learn English, and at the same time I got admitted to one of the most privileged institute in the United States.
mm,
I had two bags. I had never came across United. I've never been to United States before. I'd never been outside of India before. So I
mm,
packed my bags, came to Providence, and thought this was the best place in the world, and I never wanted to leave Providence.
wow.
But you know, I also grew up watching a lot of Bollywood movies, and a lot of Bollywood movies have this bigger than life picture of New York. And I
Mm,
said, you know what? I want to live in New York. I want to see what that life is.
Yeah.
So after I graduated from Brown, I moved to New York City, found an apartment in East Village, and ran into one of the founders of Oscar in an elevator.
Wow. I mean, just to the listeners out there, a startup I was at, we used Oscar as well, and I'm very familiar. If you don't mind, so you ran into the founder of Oscar in an elevator. What was Oscar's scale at that time? And if you don't mind, kind of share what Oscar is to listeners as well.
Yeah, Oscar is a new age health insurance company that is trying to reduce administrative burden on providers, patients, and trying to modernize health insurance in United States using technology. I was going for an interview in the same building where Oscar was incubated.
Mm,
And really, I think Oscar was probably 50, 60 people at that point, really, really small.
mhm,
Um, and that basically they were hiring people left, right, and center.
mm,
And I was just very lucky to get was was just like really lucky to become one of the earliest employees at Oscar.
mm.
Saw that team grow from 50, 60 people to 2,500 people through IPO. And
Wow.
that was one of the most incredible stories of seeing a company scale up and close and working with some of the smartest people I've met in my life.
Mm,
And that became the basis of Certify to so much extent. In fact, everything I've known about provider data and network management is because I built the same system at Oscar for 7 long years.
wow, it's incredible. I mean, kind of going back to that interaction, I would like to hear how did your joining of Oscar look like? So you ran into the founder, but I mean, what was your role at Oscar, and how did that even come across?
It was really a dream kind of a situation. I ran into one of the founders. They asked me to come meet them after my interview. I went upstairs. They had a contractor role open. They didn't even have a full-time role open.
Mm,
And I was supposed to do a very tactical things of auditing other customers that they had, which is like a very technical thing that you do in a health insurance company.
mhm,
And I was looking for a job. It felt interesting, and I only asked interviewer one question. I was like, it seems this particular thing seems like the perfect thing to automate.
mm,
Why are you having people like me doing this thing? And they're
yeah.
like, that's exactly what we wanted to hear. Would you come full time
Mm,
and automate this, help us automate this process?
wow.
And I signed up for that. So they had really no providers in the network, no infrastructure for provider networks, and they hired me to build that from ground up. And
Mm,
that's how I really started at Oscar.
wow, that's incredible. I mean, just seeing one of the milestones myself, I know 40,000 plus um, providers was kind of under your wing as well. I mean, what that is incredible because I'm curious. Nothing automated before you joined. You joined responsible for maybe leading some of that automation, and then 40,000 plus providers. How long did that take? What did that look like for you
Yeah.
with Oscar?
When I joined, there was one big Google sheet
Mm,
with 260 columns and 5,000 rows.
yeah.
That was Oscar's entire provider network management credentialing system that existed when I joined. Um, Over a period of time, we actually grew the provider network to 600,000.
Mm,
40,000 was directly contracted, and the rest was just delegated to major hospital systems. So
wow.
I was building those partnerships with Providence Health System and Baylor Scott White. You can think about all major hospital systems that are across United States,
Mhm,
and my team was responsible for building those key partnerships across United States.
I see.
So anything that touched provider data, network management, and compliance, credentialing, loading those contracts, managing provider data in directory, regulatory operations. It is so funny that every part of healthcare operation is touched by provider data. They
Yeah.
rely on accurate provider data, and yet there was no single source of truth for provider data.
Mm,
And that's what we built at Oscar first. And I took all the learnings and started building out state of the art system for that particular problem at Certify.
wow. Yeah, diving into Certify, what does this transition look like from Oscar? and then starting Certify? What was that inspiration to then launch your own venture? Kind of similar.
Yeah, a great question. I never thought I would be starting a company.
Mm,
What I was really looking for is a vendor that would solve all my problem as a customer at Oscar. I
mm,
looked at every single vendor in the market. What I ran into was point solution with no automation, no data capabilities, just bunch of small companies who were building, trying to solve very small part of the entire equation.
mm,
And their entire operation was human automation based, which meant big Philippines and offshore team just taking screenshots, putting a PDF together and sending it back.
mm,
What it meant was it took us 120 days on an average to onboard a provider. It was
mm.
just a lag. You can imagine all the impact.
Yeah.
Members were waiting for care. You had regulatory issues. We were getting fined. The claims were getting denied.
Mm,
We had such downstream effects of like that process that
yeah.
it didn't make sense. On the other hand, I was really asking Oscar leadership to fund us for 30, 40 million engineering dollars of engineering resources to
Mm,
build this in-house. None of that made sense. So during the peak of pandemic, my wife is a software engineer. She really taught me how to code again. I had
mm,
like an engineer, I hadn't coded for about 7, 8 years. So I
yep.
had forgotten all the basics. She helped me brush up all the skills. And during the peak of pandemic, just as a side project, we started building it out. What state of art system would look like.
Mm,
What would an ideal system, which is API first, data first, automation first, what does that system look like? One thing led to another. A lot of people from my network at Oscar who had gone out and started their own companies,
mm.
I started reaching out to them and they were really interested in that platform that we're creating. And that's really the origin story.
Wow.
Without thinking too much, we were just building what an ideal system would look like,
Yeah.
and that got us market traction.
Wow, it's incredible. I mean, it's kind of perfect timing with COVID too. When was official launch? Was that in 2021? And what did that look like with COVID for that
Yeah,
launch?
so we spent about 18 months
Mhm,
just building the most extensive data model for provider data across the US healthcare industry.
mm,
So our backend stores up to 1600 data elements on a provider.
mm,
And we were really particular about that this system needs to be scalable, and we don't have to keep adding like new tables. We don't need to keep adding new provider data elements. This model will be able to store every single data element on a provider. We wanted to create a single source of truth for provider data.
yep.
What helped us during COVID was the initial traction with the digital health companies
Mhm,
was really relatively easier for us because so many digital health companies were just popping up left, right, and center.
mm,
And that became our playing ground to test the product, to get the initial traction, to test it out with real customers who were paying us and scale it from there for enterprise customers like hospital systems and payers.
mm,
But from day zero, our vision was very clear that if we wanted to become a really substantial company in the space, we had to sell to payers and hospital systems.
yeah.
And that was really clear from day zero.
Mm. Yeah, what does that look like? Kind of working with hospitals, working with different providers. What does that relationship look like between Certify and the provider?
Yeah, it's like a typical B2B relationship.
Yep.
We started selling credentialing product as that was our Trojan horse. That's what we call our Trojan horse. And there are
Mhm,
few strategic reasons why we started with credentialing. It's the first point of contact between a provider and a network.
mm,
So you're owning a provider touch point. And one of our fundamental thesis at Certify is any company that owns provider touch points is ultimately going to win the market.
mm,
Credentialing is the first point of contact, and so it is upstream than any other function that requires provider data.
yep.
And so we believe that it is the de facto source of truth.
Mm,
That's where the inaccuracy problem starts, because you're asking a provider to fill out same 40-page application 18, 20 times every single year.
yeah.
No one is going to do that. So they providers give you inaccurate information, providers give you incomplete information,
Mm,
and that has huge downstream impact overall on the healthcare organization.
mm,
We want is, we say that we don't require you to fill 40-page application form. We only require 6 data elements, and with those 6 data elements we are able to capture up to 1600 data elements
mm,
and store it on our backend. It basically, it reduces cost, it improves margins, and for hospital systems actually it's a revenue generating opportunity.
mm,
You reduce workforce abrasion, you reduce provider burnout, and it directly impacts patient experience.
yeah.
And that's what we are building at Certify. We are building that core provider data infrastructure, a single source of truth that
Mm,
helps the US healthcare industry reduce administrative burden.
mm. What is the main way of monetizing for Certify? Is that like the hospital comes and onboards onto the platform, they have access to data? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. We primarily, most of our revenue is coming from payers today. We
Yeah.
primarily sell to payers and insurance companies. That's our first market. That's also because that's where I came from. So I understand the problem really intimately.
Yep.
We have like we although we are in healthcare, we act like a typical SaaS company. So we have an
Mhm,
implementation fees, we have a platform fees, and we have a subscription model.
mhm.
Our customers subscribe to certain credits at the start of the year, and we basically send them a recurring it's more like Netflix. You can
Yep.
watch any number of movies that you subscribe to, and you pay us monthly fees for that. So
I see.
they basically subscribe to a certain credit volume, and then they just pay us a subscription amount.
I see. Yeah, kicking off in say that 2020, 21 period, what were those first crucial hires? I know you talked to some of the key hires from your previous role as well, but what did that team build out look like at scaling?
Yeah, number one thing, honestly, number one thing that makes or breaks a company is the hires. I
Yep.
was very fortunate, and I'm really grateful for my friends at Oscar who decided to take a bet on me and join Certify at the initial stages.
Mm,
It was a core group of some of my really close friends from Oscar that had worked with me on this problem at Oscar.
mm,
That became the founding team. They were more senior than I was, and in initial days we just needed to get things done, and
yeah.
that was the best team that I could have gathered for the initial stages.
Mm,
As we grew, of course, I think the growth requires different set of people, and we basically over a period of growth have basically hired people who have been there and done that. I know I'm a first time founder. I know this is my first time raising venture capital funds and running a company,
yep.
and I don't want my ego to get in between that.
Mm,
So I've particularly gone out and hired people who have scaled Series A companies multiple times in their career
yeah.
and given them the free way to operate at Certify as well. So
Mm,
we have leads for operations, leads for product, engineering, growth. And these are the people who have scaled healthcare companies from 1 million to 10 million and beyond multiple times. And
mm,
that's our core team at Certify today.
yep.
And honestly, that is one of the biggest reasons why we win in the market.
Love it. Yeah, kicking off, I know Certify has very notable VC backers. At what point did you guys then raise capital? I know you mentioned first time founder, first time raising funds. What point in the stage was Certify when you went to VC?
Yeah, I think it was pre-revenue for us when we
Mhm.
raised our seed round. But we had a product and a data model really built out.
Yeah.
So even then, at that point, we were able to go on a call and tell, do you have a provider that you want to see if everything is fine with that particular provider? You would
Mm,
give us any random provider in United States. We would put just those 6 data elements instead of requiring a 40-page application form, and pull all the information real time on that particular provider.
mm.
We showed that to VCs, and they were really impressed by the data that we had collected, data
Yep.
infrastructure, and our tech first thinking. One thing led to another. Of course, like seed round was the most difficult round that I have raised. I
Yep.
didn't have any. Of course, like I didn't come from having raised multiple rounds multiple times.
Yep.
Met probably 25, 30 people, and Upfront Ventures was really, really generous in saying that this is the company that we want to back in the space. So
Mm.
that was our seed round. That was November 2021. December 2021 is when we started generating revenues. That was
Mm.
immediately after we raised seed round, because we were already doing a lot of free pilots. We were already like getting customer feedback. So all of that was in motion.
Mm.
And I think like our seed round was November 2021, when Upfront Venture led our
Mm.
$4.5 million seed round.
Wow. Incredible. I mean, so just launching in 2021, here we are 2024. If you can reflect on maybe like a major milestone that the company's really proud of, you're proud of as a founder as well, looking back, what would you say that is that's maybe resulted in the success you see today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think our our focus on enterprise clients, we won Oscar RFP when we were really 4 month old as a company. Post
Mm.
seed round, Oscar went for RFP, and we won that RFP four
Mm.
months as a baby company.
Wow.
But we knew that we had to execute well, and we really like we made sure that our first implementation was really spotless. And
Mm.
there were hiccups around along the way. There are always road bumps around the way, but we were super focused on making Oscar and initial customers really successful.
Mm.
We launched a new product that could scale with the scale of Oscar. I knew the problems really well because I had been there in their shoes before. So that was a major milestone.
Yep.
I think along the way, looking at our growth, General Catalyst Series A was like, you just cannot undermine a really credible investor coming in and leading your Series A. And
Mm.
I'm really grateful for General Catalyst, who took a shot on me and led our Series A.
Mm.
Some of the key hires, our Chief Growth Officer, we hired him to build an enterprise muscle, and he has done wonders for us. He has
Mm.
absolutely done wonders for us. And now we are at a point where we have that enterprise muscle, where we are selling to enterprise clients, we are onboarding enterprise clients.
Mm.
And as long as recently as 2 or 3 months ago, onboarding one of the largest national plans in the country, you
Mm.
get so much credibility when you land a national plan.
Yeah.
And I think like along the way we have just kept growing our ambition and said that we have to really sell up market, because that's where most of the problem is, and that's where most of the efficiency is to be gained.
Mm. Incredible. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd like to conclude with this question. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, no regrets,
Yeah.
for sure. But I don't know if I can give advice, but I can share what has worked for me.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a North Star that everyone needs to work towards. But we as a company, and me particularly, I strongly believe that results are outcome of process and preparation.
Mm.
As a startup, there is so much outside of your control. Even if you do 100% things in your control that are like in a right way,
Yep.
results still could go uh, not your way. Like they could still go in your competitor's way. So we fundamentally believe that as long as you have done everything that you can, your intentions are right, and you focus on process and preparation, results will just be an outcome of that. And
Mm.
it really doesn't matter if results are in your favor or not. Um, because what matters at the end of the day, if you really work hard and do the right things and have the right intentions, some sooner or later things are going to work out for you.
Mm.
So we basically have a North Star, and all we focus on is, are we doing everything in our power to get towards that North Star?
Mm,
not thinking about that North Star, not thinking about the results along the way, but just so heads down on process and preparation.
mm,
And I would say for anyone, just detach yourself with the results,
mm.
because that's the cause of happiness or sadness. I don't think preparation can go wrong either ways.
Love it. Well, Anshul, thank you so much for joining me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Certify at certifyos.com.